Imagine standing in the smoldering ashes of your own home on Christmas morning.
Oh man, that's just a complete nightmare.
Right. And the fire chief looks you right in the eye and tells you the blaze was, so incredibly hot, it literally vaporized 5 of your children.
Just completely gone, vaporized.
Yeah. He insists the fire left absolutely zero trace behind, which sounds like an unfathomable tragedy, right? But there's just one huge problem.
Science.
Exactly. When you look at modern forensics, the science tells us that what the fire chief claimed is, well, it's physically impossible.
Yeah, it creates this cognitive dissonance that is almost impossible to process because you're caught between the trauma of this devastating fire and a biological reality that just flat out refuses to let the official story stand.
You literally can't reconcile the two.
You can't. And when a historical foundation gives way like that, I mean, you are left in a landscape that is completely disorienting.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting on Christmas Eve, 1945, in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, with the Sodder family.
Right, and to really understand the stakes here, you got to picture the Sodder household at that time.
Yeah.
George and Jenny Sodder were Italian immigrants who had built a very successful, very busy life in their community.
They were doing well.
They were. They had a bustling house with 10 children, though their oldest son was away serving in the military at the time. So 9 children were sleeping at home that night.
And it's a festive, chaotic evening, right?
Okay.
It's Christmas Eve. The oldest sister had just brought home new toys from her job at a dime store. The younger kids had been, begging to stay up late to play with them.
Classic Christmas Eve energy.
Exactly. And eventually the house settles down. But then the night descends into this bizarre, truly terrifying sequence of events. Around 1 a.m., a fire breaks out. George and Jenny manage to escape, along with 4 of the kids. But 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, and they're ranging in age from 5 to 14. They're trapped upstairs.
Yeah.
And they just vanish.
Yeah, and when the sources say vanish, they mean completely absent from the physical record. Nothing. But the fire itself is really where the anomalies begin to stack up. It wasn't just a house catching fire,
No, it reads like an orchestrated attack. The anomalies are just staggering. Let's look at the timeline from the sources. At 12:30 a.m., Jenny wakes up to a ringing phone downstairs. She answers it. It's a woman asking for a name Jenny doesn't even know.
Right, like a wrong number.
But Jenny hears this weird, chilling laugh and the distinct sound of clinking glasses in the background.
That's so creepy.
Super unsettling. She hangs up, assumes it's a prank or a wrong number, and goes back to sleep. Then, at 1 a.m., she hears a loud bang on the roof, followed by a rolling sound, like an object physically bouncing down the shingles.
And half an hour after that rolling sound, she wakes up again, but this time to the smell of smoke. George's office is on fire.
Now, the official ruling by the local authorities later on was, quote, faulty wiring.
Faulty wiring.
But the sources point out a massive contradiction here. During the early, frantic stages of the fire, the downstairs lights were still on.
Yeah, I was reading that detail, and it completely shatters the official narrative.
It does.
I mean, if it's an electrical fire that started in the fuse box or the wiring, the power should be dead. The house should be completely dark. But it wasn't. And this is where my mind goes straight to, like, a thriller novel.
Oh, absolutely.
It feels like a frantic, real-life locked room mystery, except the room itself is actively being destroyed. Because every single logical escape route or method of calling for help was systematically neutralized.
The systematic nature of the sabotage is what makes it so chilling.
Right.
I mean, George realizes his kids are trapped upstairs, so he runs outside to grab his ladder. He always keeps it propped against the side of the house for emergencies.
And let me guess, it's not there. It's missing. The family later found it dragged 75 feet away, just thrown down an embankment into the brush.
That's insane. Who moves a ladder during a house fire?
Someone who doesn't want anyone getting to the second floor. So George thinks fast and runs to get water from the rain barrel to fight the flames.
Right.
It is completely frozen solid. He realizes he can't fight the fire, but he figures he can reach the second-story windows if he climbs on top of his vehicles. George runs a trucking company, so he has 2 massive coal-hauling trucks parked right outside.
And they worked perfectly the day before, right?
Perfectly. He tries the ignition on the first truck. Nothing. He tries the second truck. It won't start either.
Both of them are dead.
Yeah.
It's magically dead.
Yeah. And the isolation tactics continue when they try to contact the outside world. The older daughter runs through the freezing night to a neighbor's house to call the fire department, but the operator doesn't respond.
Oh, my God.
Another neighbor tries to call from a nearby tavern. The lines are dead, and we later learn from the sources why the Sodders' own phone was dead. A telephone repairman actually confirmed the lines weren't burned by the fire.
They were cut.
Exactly. They were physically cut by someone who had climbed 14 feet up a wooden pole to sever them.
Okay, and this part of the source material just blew my mind. The authorities actually arrested a man named Lonnie Johnson for stealing a block and tackle from the Sodder property that exact night.
Oh, right, the block and tackle guy.
Yeah. He admitted to cutting the lines, claiming he thought it was a power line, but he completely denied having anything to do with the fire. Let's pause and think about how absurd that is.
It's pretty convenient.
It's beyond convenient. A block and tackle is a heavy system of ropes and pulleys used to lift things like car engines. We're supposed to believe some guy decided to climb a 14-foot pole at 1:10 a.m. in the freezing December cold to steal a heavy pulley system.
Right.
Accidentally severs the phone lines, and coincidentally, the house bursts into flames just minutes later. It is impossibly calculated.
It really strains all credulity.
And, to cap it all off, the Fayetteville Fire Department, which was only 2.5 miles down the road, didn't arrive until 8 a.m., 7 hours later.
Yeah, and the excuse provided for that delay borders on the surreal. Fire Chief F.J. Morris claimed he couldn't drive the fire truck, and he had to wait for someone who could.
The fire chief couldn't drive the fire truck.
That's what he claimed.
So the house just burns to the ground in about 45 minutes, with the family standing outside watching. And this naturally brings us to the aftermath, where the forensic science takes center stage.
Right, because if the house burned down and 5 kids were inside,
There had to be remains.
Chief Morris told the family that the fire was hot enough to completely cremate the bodies, leaving absolutely nothing behind. He urged them to just accept that the children had been turned to ash.
But Jenny Sodder's intuition as a mother told her that was impossible. She refused to accept it.
Yeah.
She actually started morbidly experimenting in her own kitchen.
Yeah, this part is wild.
She took animal bones, chicken, beef, pork, and burned them in her stove to see if they would turn to ash. They never did. No matter how hot she got the stove, she was left with charred, recognizable bones every single time.
What's fascinating here is how modern forensic data completely vindicates a grieving mother's 1940s DIY kitchen stove experiments.
It really does.
We have a source here from the International Journal of Research in Medical Sciences detailing the forensic reality of charred bodies, and it just completely dismantles the fire chief's claim.
I was reading through that medical journal source,
Mm-hmm.
and it shattered my assumptions. Because, I always thought a raging house fire just vaporized everything, turned it all to dust.
A lot of people think that, but it turns out human bodies are basically walking water reservoirs.
Exactly. We're mostly water.
And that high water content is the crucial factor. Because of it, completely incinerating a human body is an incredibly difficult thermodynamic feat. The journal notes that an ordinary household fire generates temperatures that seldom exceed 1,200 to 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit.
Which sounds hot.
It is hot, but a fire burning at that temperature simply lacks the intensity and the duration to destroy human bone.
Yeah, the journal specifically maps out the math for us. It says proper cremation requires temperatures of 1,800 to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, sustained in a highly controlled environment for an hour and a half to 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Right. And the Sodder house was an open-air structure fire that was reduced to the ground in just 45 minutes.
Yeah, even when bodies are exposed to severe, prolonged structural fires, forensic anthropologists expect to find highly recognizable skeletal remains. We're talking skulls, femurs, pelvic bones.
They didn't just disappear.
No, they don't. Furthermore, the sources note that various household appliances in the Sodder home, like a toaster, were found in the ashes, still completely recognizable.
That's a great point.
Right. If a fire can't melt the thin metal of a kitchen toaster, it is not going to vaporize 5 human skeletons without a single trace.
Now, I do have to push back just a little bit here because we want to look at all angles of the source material. One detail mentioned in the texts is that George ran a coal trucking business, right? And he actually had a supply of coal in the basement. Plus, there were 55-gallon drums of gasoline in the garage.
Ah, right. The accelerants.
Yeah. Could that coal and fuel have potentially created a much hotter, longer smoldering fire than a standard house fire? Especially since George, in his grief, quickly bulldozed 5 feet of dirt over the basement to make a memorial garden. Did he inadvertently trap the heat and create a sort of underground oven?
That is a very astute counterpoint. And theoretically, yes, the trapped heat from the coal and the insulating dirt could advance the cremation process well beyond the typical 45-minute window of a normal house fire.
Huh?
However, the sheer absence of any significant skeletal remains for 5 distinct individuals still completely defies forensic expectation.
Even with the coal?
Even with the coal. In advanced cremation environments or mass casualty fires where fuel accelerates the blaze, bone fragments, teeth, and calcium skeletal pieces always persist. You simply do not get 5 bodies turning to thin air.
Which leaves the Sodder family staring into an empty ash pit, realizing the science just doesn't fully add up. If the children didn't burn, they had to have left the house.
Right.
And if they left the house during a fire, they were either lured out or forced out. Which forces us to look at who in this small town had a motive to hurt George Sodder, bringing us into the extortion and mafia theories.
Yeah, and to understand the town's dynamic, the sources point out that George was a highly vocal critic of Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy.
And real quick, we must objectively report this part without taking any political side ourselves.
Absolutely.
We are just conveying the historical context from the sources here. His anti-fascist remarks deeply angered some local community members.
It created intense friction in that 1940s Italian immigrant community. The sources actually note a specific event months prior to the fire. An insurance salesman named Rosser Long visited George, was rebuffed, and became furious.
And what did he say?
He explicitly told George his house would go up in smoke and his children would be, quote, destroyed. And he specifically cited George's remarks about Mussolini as the reason.
Okay, that is a glaring red flag.
It is. And the intimidation didn't stop at threats. That same guy, Rosser Long, ended up serving on the coroner's jury that officially ruled the fire an accident caused by faulty wiring.
That is a blatant conflict of interest.
Huge conflict of interest.
And it gets weirder when you look at the local authorities. Remember Fire Chief Morris, the guy who, quote-unquote, couldn't drive the fire truck?
Oh, yeah.
A private investigator hired by the family uncovered a rumor that Morris had secretly buried a box at the fire site shortly after the blaze.
This part is just so twisted.
It really is. When confronted, Morris actually admitted it. He dug up a dynamite box, and inside was a mass of fresh flesh.
Yeah, and Morris allegedly hoped the family would find it, believe it was a child's unburned heart, and be satisfied enough to just stop investigating.
Let that sink in for a second.
It's awful.
A public official burying a raw beef liver in a dynamite box to trick grieving parents into giving up their search for their missing kids.
It is beyond cruel.
It really is. So George and Jenny realize they're entirely on their own here. They start chasing leads across the country. And there were sightings.
Lots of sightings.
Right. The most credible one, according to the family, came from a woman working at a Charleston hotel. She claimed she saw the children about a week after the fire. They were accompanied by 2 men and 2 women of, quote, Italian extraction. She said they registered at midnight, and when she tried to speak to the kids, one of the men looked at her with pure hostility, started speaking rapid Italian, and completely froze her out.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Sodder family wasn't just fighting a potential kidnapping ring. They were fighting layers of bizarre local corruption, incompetence, dead ends, and just a profound lack of closure.
They never got a straight answer.
No, but they never stopped digging. Literally. In 1949, George actually brought in a pathologist from Washington, D.C. to excavate the site. And they finally found something. 4 lumbar vertebrae.
The family must have thought they finally had proof.
They did.
But the Smithsonian Institution analyzed the bones, and the results were completely crushing. The vertebrae showed 0 fire damage, and more importantly, they used bone fusion to date the remains.
Right, because bones grow from the ends.
Exactly, and the growth plates, or epiphyseal plates, fuse at very specific ages. Based on that fusion, the Smithsonian determined the bones belonged to someone aged 16 to 22.
And the oldest missing Sodder child was 14.
Yeah.
So the scientific conclusion was that the bones were likely just swept up in the dirt. George had bulldozed over the site earlier, possibly brought in from a nearby cemetery or dump site. It was just another dead end.
Heartbreaking. But then, in 1967, which is 22 years after the fire, Jenny goes to the mail and finds an envelope from Central City, Kentucky.
Wow, out of nowhere.
Yeah. Inside is a photo of a young man in his mid-20s who bears a striking, frankly, uncanny resemblance to their son, Louis. And on the back is a cryptic, terrifying message. It says, Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie, 2 little boys. A90132 or 35.
Just super cryptic. And they hired a private detective to go to Kentucky to investigate the photo, right?
He did. He went down there, and the family never heard from him again. He just disappeared.
That is so dark. It's just a relentless cycle of hope and devastation for this family.
It is. George and Jenny spent the rest of their lives maintaining a massive billboard on Route 16 with the children's faces, literally begging the public for answers. They both died, never knowing the truth.
It's so sad.
But this brings us to a really fascinating parallel in our sources. The Sodders had to rely on corrupt fire chiefs, missing private eyes, and highway billboards. Today, families searching for answers have a tool the Sodders couldn't even dream of.
Commercial DNA testing.
Exactly.
And the deep dive sources include a 23andMe blog post that highlights a mystery from the exact same year, 1945. And it perfectly illustrates how revolutionary this technology is.
Let's get into it.
So it starts with twin sisters, Audrey and Cynthia. They grew up extremely proud of their Italian heritage. Their last name was Palmadesso. They took a DNA test, simply expecting to see their Italian roots confirmed on a map.
Okay, I know we are about to throw a lot of names out there, so let's just map out this family tree for a second to see how insane this discovery is. You have these twins, Audrey and Cynthia, taking a DNA test today. The results come back, and they have 0% Italian DNA.
0, which is a huge identity shock on its own.
Huge. But it gets crazier. Cynthia gets a notification that she matches with a 79-year-old man named Tommy Martin. They share 22% of their DNA.
And just to explain how genetic genealogy works, sharing 22% of your DNA with someone isn't statistical anomaly or some distant cousin.
No, it's very close.
Right. That amount of shared centimorgans definitively points to a very close relative. In this case, it meant Tommy Martin was Cynthia's uncle. But the twins have absolutely no idea who Tommy Martin is.
So they reach out. And Tommy tells them an incredible, tragic story. He took the DNA test, hoping to find his younger brother, Jerry Martin.
Right.
Back in June of 1945, which is just a few months before the Sodder fire, 4-year-old Jerry was kidnapped in Manhattan, a woman approached Tommy and Jerry while they were riding bikes, offered them candy, and just walked off with Jerry. Tommy never saw his brother again.
And then the twins start looking at their own father, Richard Palmadesso. Richard was raised completely isolated from his extended quote-unquote family. He was essentially raised by his nanny, a woman named Helen. The family lore was always that Richard was an illegitimate child of the nanny and a local gangster.
But the timelines match up.
Perfectly. The timeline of Jerry Martin's kidnapping in Manhattan aligns perfectly with when Richard's presumed father returned from World War II.
So the twins strongly suspect that their father, who died in 2017, was actually the kidnapped Jerry Martin. That Richard's quote-unquote mother might have literally kidnapped a child off the street to give her husband a son upon his return from the war.
It is an incredible scientific breakthrough. It offers definitive biological clues to a 75-year-old cold case.
Which makes the contrast with the modern Sodder family even sharper. You would think the descendants of the Sodders would immediately turn to this technology, given the family's decades-long history of relentless searching.
You would certainly think so.
So, what does this all mean? I look at these DNA databases like a time machine, but a time machine that didn't come with an instruction manual.
That's a great way to put it.
We are unearthing decades of deeply buried secrets in a matter of weeks. According to the sources, the last surviving Sodder sibling who was in the fire, Sylvia, died in 2021.
Right.
Her daughter, Jenny Henthorne, was interviewed recently. And she stated that the family explicitly refuses to use commercial DNA testing to find descendants of the missing children.
And their reasoning is profoundly rooted in the complex ethics of genetic privacy. She cited a desire to not invade the privacy of potential descendants, stating simply, quote, "We only want to find those who want to be found."
It is a profound contrast. George and Jenny Sodder spent 40 years practically begging the public for clues, erecting a massive billboard on a highway for millions to see. Yet their descendants draw a hard ethical line at utilizing a cotton swab and a database.
This raises an important question about the double-edged sword of modern technology in solving historical pain. Does having the scientific ability to uncover every secret mean we actually have the right to do so?
Yeah.
We're talking about the concept of generational trauma and the right not to know. The Sodder descendants have chosen to protect the potential privacy of people who may be living completely normal lives, completely oblivious to the fact that they are the grandchildren of a legendary unsolved kidnapping.
It's a heavy choice. And it brings us back to what we asked you to consider at the beginning. If there was a dark, unanswered question resting in the foundation of your own family's history, would you actually want to dig it up?
Most people assume they would.
We always assume we want the truth. We crave the satisfying ending of a solved mystery. But the truth might completely upend the lives of innocent people living today.
Human intuition is remarkably sharp. I mean, Jenny Sodder knew in her bones and proved in her kitchen oven that those children didn't burn to ash.
She knew it.
She did. But the ultimate truth of what happened that Christmas Eve remains elusive. The locked room stays locked, and maybe some doors are meant to stay closed.
I want to leave you with one chilling, lingering thought from the source material. Think about that 1967 photograph of the young man who looked so much like Louis Sodder.
Yeah.
The family eventually came to believe that if the children did survive and lived into adulthood, they failed to contact their parents only because they wanted to protect them from some greater danger.
It implies a reality almost too terrible to consider.
It really does. Because if one or more of those children did survive the fire and chose to remain hidden, what unfathomable level of trauma, coercion, or sheer terror would it require?
I can't even imagine.
Imagine what it takes to live your life, knowing your parents are grieving, watching them plead for answers on a highway billboard year after year, decade after decade, and never once picking up the phone to tell them you're alive.
That takes a dark kind of fear.
Yeah. The true mystery of the Sodder children isn't just about where they went. It's about what psychological terror it took to keep them away.